welcome to Unit 8 of our course. You've finished the midterm now, which means you have wrapped up your study of the founding documents of the United States. Congratulations on that. I've seen some great scores, and I expected no less from this class than great scores. So you've done well as a whole. You should be proud of yourselves. Now, during the first part of our course, we really spent our time talking about the founding documents of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. Part of the reason for that is to understand how our political system came to be set up as it is. We've studied the background, for example, some specific amendments to our Constitution. We've considered the words of the founders of the nation. But now we're going to turn our attention to looking at modern topics that tend to divide along political lines. One thing you've learned about as you've learned about these past documents is you've learned about how even founders didn't always agree with one another on particular topics. How their worries about government, for example, could be very different. We're no different today. Different people on different sides of political debate hold different ideas about how government should function or how involved it should be in our daily lives. Now, since we're talking about modern political topics now, it really gets to the point where you're probably going to see an opinion that a fellow classmate writes that you probably don't agree with, and that's okay. One of the things that we're going to learn about in this class is how to hold constructive political discourse. This is very important to our political system today. We can't be so divided that we're not able to talk through our beliefs with one another. And one important thing to keep in mind as you talk about these topics with one another and as you try to find mediating positions, which is something I'm going to ask you to do as class goes along, is to remember that when we're talking about ideas, don't confuse your feeling towards an idea as being your feeling towards a person. Different people have different opinions, different beliefs. It's one of the things that makes our political system so great is that so many people with so many different ideas can come together and work out a system of government where it works for the people as a whole, and we can make changes to our system as needed in the form of amendments. We can have discussions with one another about what we think our government looks like. So in today's unit, we're going to talk about political communication with one another. And one thing I note in the unit objectives is that it's fashionable today to bemoan the breakdown of political communication within the United States. It seems to be Republican versus Democrat, or Democrat versus Republican, liberal versus conservative. Those elements are present. And one thing that tends to happen is that both sides accuse one another of not coming to the table to reach mediated solutions. So, what's going to happen throughout the rest of this course is that you all are going to have the opportunity to act as a mediator within the discussion boards. There are going to be a number of different topics that we're going to cover as the year goes along on some very dividing topics where there's certain to be different opinions. And what I'm really going to be asking you all to do is to think about ways that each side can talk to one another about these issues without falling into shouting matches or saying, well, you're wrong because I think that's a dumb idea. That's not a very good argument. That doesn't get us anywhere. So we're going to begin thinking about why different sides hold the opinions and the thoughts that they do. And we're going to see how they're influenced by the U.S. Constitution and how they see their position as being defended. So after completing this unit's really going to help you to begin to prepare to see how both sides, why they hold the opinions that they do, and how they fashion their arguments. So after this unit, you should be able to understand the ways that family, culture, faith, and media impact political stances. These are the elements that will impact the political stance that someone has. And we're going to talk about uh, how and why that occurs. And hopefully, you'll begin to become aware of how your own political stances have been influenced by particular elements within your life. Next, you're going to be able to identify opportunities for mediation. Learn how to mediate political arguments. You're also going to learn how to conduct constructive political debate while remaining civil. And finally, you'll be able to explain uh, how to examine coverage of political issues. And that's going to be very important because your final paper that acts as your final at the end of this term is going to ask you to cover a particularly divisive political topic, and you are going to bring sources from different sides of the debate, different coverage, and you're going to begin to look at how that coverage is presented. So let's take a look at the reading assignment for this week. There's a number of pieces that I would like you all to read. The first is an essay titled The Meaning of Civility. And this comes from the University of Colorado. They have a program called the Conflict Resolution Consortium. And one of the things they're going to talk about in this article is how to have constructive confrontation in political debate. Now, I've told you that I would like you all to be thinking of mediating stances in the upcoming term. But another thing I want you to realize is that when I'm asking you to mediate points or to learn to listen to another side, I'm not asking you to abandon your own beliefs or to say, "All right, I'm just going to give in because I've heard this other argument and I think the professor wants me to." That's not what I'm saying. I want you to be able to defend the political stances that you hold, but I also want you to learn how to be respectful and to approach a concept thoughtfully. And, also to be willing to say, wow, I've really rethought this position, and maybe I'm not so certain if I hold this stance any longer. How do you deal with that? How do you talk through, but also how to defend your own beliefs. So this essay will help you to begin to think about that. In the next article, this is a 2014 study from the American Press Institute. And what they did was they did a survey that provided data on how Americans got their news and what sources they trusted. So take a look through that. And then I have provided you a checklist for how to consider media sources. Once again, I'm opening up with a portion of a letter from James Madison, who wrote in 1822, "A popular government without popular information, or the means of acquiring it, is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. A democracy depends on you being informed as a voter. This is incredibly important. It means you need to be reading multiple sources for your news, and maybe not relying on just one news outlet, but relying on several so that you can form the fullest picture of an issue that you can in your mind. So, as I know, our founders believed in the importance of both education and publicly accessible news. Without either, a democracy such as ours would be hard pressed to flourish. There are many media outlets today, and you will find a mix of left leaning, right leaning, and centrist sources for your news. You shouldn't be content to rely on any one source for knowledge. That is why it's important for you to ask questions when reading news sources. And I've given you a checklist to think about as you read, listen, or watch the news. With that in mind, you'll then look at a number of articles covering the recent Burwell versus Hobby Lobby ruling that came out this summer. So you'll read sources from the New York Times, Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. Consider their coverage of this debate. I want you to think about those questions that I've presented you with for each source that you read. Because one of the things that you will be doing on the discussion boards this week, you will have the option to talk about how these articles compared to one another and make some observations as you go along. So for the Unit 8 discussion board, I've asked you 3 questions as usual. On the first point, you're going to talk about what, if you choose to answer question 1, what factors impact a person's political stance? Can negotiation and mediation occur if a belief is deeply held, and if so, how? Question 2. How do Americans get their news? And were you surprised by which sources were most deeply trusted? And finally, the third topic. Read the sources on the Burwell versus Hobby Lobby ruling. Apply the questions that I provided to you and how to consider media sources. Did coverage differ between the sources? And if so, how? And as you're talking about that question too, you might even comment on your own awareness of what's going on in these stories and if you ran into any surprises while you were reading. So consider these questions. As we move forward, like I said, this is part of the semester now where you're going to see probably some political opinions of others you may not always agree with. I do ask you to remain courteous. Remember that first article in the reading assignment. You can certainly defend your position, but remember to do so in a courteous manner. I'll be on the boards weekly as usual. If you have any questions, I do hope that you'll reach out. I hope that we really begin to have some fun with these different political debates as we move forward. And also, as a public service announcement, since it is October, that means November is just upon us, which means voting day is around the corner. If you have any questions about registering to vote or what the voting process is like, I would urge you to be in contact with me. I can help you figure out where you need to go to register or even help you think about some topics that you might want to be thinking about as election day comes forward. In various states that you're in, I'm certain that there are local elections and possibly even amendments to your local state constitution that will consider your careful consideration. So be thinking about your civic duty as you think about civics this week. I look forward to talking to you on the boards, and as always, if you have any questions, please do be in touch.